Well, I got interested in reading very early because a story was read to me by Hans Christian Andersen, which was The Little Mermaid. And I don't know if you remember The Little Mermaid, but it's dreadfully sad. The Little Mermaid falls in love with this prince, but she cannot marry him because, of course, she's a mermaid. And it's so sad. I can't tell you the details because I might weep. But anyway, as soon as I had finished this story, I got outside and I walked around and around the house where we lived. It was a brick house. And I made up a story with a happy ending because I thought that was due to The Little Mermaid. And it sort of slipped my mind that it was only made up to be a different story from me. It wasn't going to go all around the world. But I felt I had done my best, and that from now on the Little Mermaid would marry the prince and live happily ever after, which was certainly her desert because she'd done awful things to win the prince's power. I mean, like his ease, because she had to change her limbs into. She had to get limbs that ordinary people have, and walk in them. But every step she took, agonizing pain. This is what she was willing to go through to get the prince. So I thought she deserved more than death on the water. And I gave her this. And I didn't worry about the fact that maybe the rest of the world wouldn't know the new story because I felt it had been published once I thought about it. So there you are. That was an early start on writing stories, I believe.
And tell us, how did you learn to tell a story and to write it?
I made stories up all the time. I had a long walk to school. And during that walk, I would generally make up stories. And as I got older, the stories would be more and more about myself as a heroine in some situation or other. And it didn't bother me that they weren't going to be published to the world immediately. And I don't know if I even thought about other people knowing them or reading them, but it was the story itself, generally a very satisfying one from my point of view. It would show, it would be beyond the Little Mermaid idea of that you showed bravery and that you were clever and that you were, in general, able to make a better world because you would jump in there and have magic powers and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Was it important that the story was told from a woman's perspective?
I never thought of it as being important, but I never thought of myself as being anything but a woman. And there were many good stories about little girls and women. After you got to be about, I don't know, in your teens, I think this stopped a bit. It was more than helping the man to achieve his needs and so on. But when I was a young girl, I had no feeling of inferiority at all in being a woman. And this may have been because I lived in a part of Ontario where, let me see, women did most of the reading. Women did most of the telling of stories. The men were outside doing important things, and they didn't go in for stories. So I felt quite at home.
How did that environment inspire you?
I don't know if I needed any inspiration. I thought that stories are so important in the world, and I want to make up some of these stories, and I want to keep on doing this. And it didn't, in a way, it didn't have anything to do with other people. It didn't. I didn't need to tell anybody, and it wasn't until much later that I realized that the stories, it would be interesting if one got them into a larger audience. Yes.
What is important to you when you tell a story?
Well, obviously, in those early days, the importance was the happy ending. I did not tolerate unhappy endings, for my heroine anyway. And later on, I began to read things like Wuthering Heights, and very, very unhappy endings would take place. So I changed my ideas completely and went in for the tragic, which I enjoyed.
You did. But what can be so interesting in describing small town Canadian life?
You just have to be there. I think any life can be interesting. I think any surrounds can be interesting. Perhaps if I don't think I would have been nearly so brave as a writer if I had lived in a town and if I had gone to school with other people who were interested in the same things I was, and a general, what we might call a higher cultural level. I didn't have to cope with that. I was the only person I knew who wrote stories, and so, though I didn't tell them to anybody, but I was the only, as far as I knew, the only person who could do this in the world, for a while. But
were you always that confident in your writing?
I was for a long time. I became very unconfident when I became grown up and met a few other people who were writing. And I realized that it was a much harder job than I had expected. But I never gave up at all. It was just something I did.
When you start on a story, do you always have it plotted out?
I do, but then it often changes. I start it with a plot, and I work at it, and then I see that it goes another way, and things happen as I'm writing the story. But you have to, at least I have to start out with some kind of fairly clear idea of what the story is about. And then, indeed, it may change.
How consumed are you about writing when you're into a story?
Desperately consumed. But I always got lunch for my children, did I not? And did that sort of thing. But I was a housewife, and a fairly regular housewife. So I learned to write in the time's off. And I don't think I ever gave it up, though there were certain times at which I was very discouraged because I began to see, as you do, that the stories I was making up and the stories I was writing were not very good, and that I had a lot to learn, and that it was a much, much harder job than I expected. But I didn't stop. I don't think I stopped for any length of time at all, ever.
What part is hardest when you want to tell a story?
I think probably that part where you go over the story and realize how bad it is. The first part, excitement. The second part, pretty good. And then you pick it up one morning and you think, what nonsense. But then it's when you really have to get to work on it. Mm-hmm. And for me, it always seemed worthy to do. It was my fault that it wasn't better. It was not the story's fault.
But how do you turn it around if you're not satisfied?
Hard work. But I'm trying to think of a better way to explain that. You have characters that you haven't given a chance, and you begin to think about them more and do something more, quite different sometimes with them. And in my earlier days, I was prone to a lot of flowery prose, and I gradually learned to take a lot of that out. And then you just go on thinking about it and getting more and more, finding more and more out about what the story is about, which you thought you had in the beginning, but you actually have a lot more to learn.
How many stories have you thrown away?
When I was young, I threw them all away. I have no idea, but I haven't done that so often in recent years. I've generally known what I had to do to make them live. But there's still always a mistake somewhere that I decide you've got to realize this is a mistake and forget about it.
Do you ever regret throwing a story away?
I don't think so, because I think I've gone through enough agony about it that I think this really didn't work from the beginning. But as I say, that doesn't happen very often.
Growing older, how does it change your writing?
Oh, well, in a very predictable way. You start writing about beautiful young princesses, and then you start writing about housewives and children, and then you start writing about old women. And it just goes on without you necessarily trying to do anything to change it. Your vision changes.
Do you think you have been important to other female writers? Being a housewife, being able to combine household work with writing?
You know, I don't know about that. I would hope that I have been. And I'm not sure. I think I went to other female writers when I was young, and that was a great encouragement to me. But whether I have been to others, I don't know. I think women have a much, I wouldn't say easier time, but it's much more okay now for a woman to be doing something important, not just to be fooling around with a little game that she does when everybody else is out of the house, but to be really seriously writing, just the way a man would write.
What impact do you hope you have on someone who reads your stories, a woman especially?
Oh, well, I want my stories to move people. I don't care if they're men or women or children or, you know, I want my stories to be something about life that causes people to not just say, oh, isn't that the truth, but to feel some kind of reward from the writing. And that doesn't mean that it has to have a happy ending or anything, but just that everything that the story tells moves the writer in such a way that you feel you're a different person when you finish.
Who do you think you are? What has that expression meant to you over the years?
Well, it's a sort of classic expression of, I grew up in the countryside, and I grew up with people who were generally Scotch-Irish, and it was a very common idea not to try too much, never to think you were smart. That was another image that was very popular. Oh, you think you're smart, and to do anything like writing, you have to think you're smart for quite a while, and so. But it was never different. I was just a peculiar person.
Were you an early feminist?
I never knew about the word feminism, but of course I was a feminist because I grew up in a part of Canada where women could write more easily than men. The big important writers would be men, but knowing that a woman wrote stories was probably less to her discredit than if a man wrote stories, because it was not a manly occupation. I mean, that is very much in my youth. It's not that way at all now.
Would it have changed your writing if you had finished your university studies?
It might have indeed. It might have made me a lot more cautious and a lot more scared of being a writer, because the more I knew about what people had done, naturally, the more I was rather daunted, and would perhaps have thought I couldn't do it, but I don't think that would have happened really. I think it would have happened for a while, but then I wanted to write so much that I would have just gone ahead and tried anyway.
Was the writing a gift given to you?
I don't think the people around me would have thought that, but I never thought of it as a gift. I thought of it as something that you could do, that I could do if I tried hard enough. But I always thought of it trying hard enough. So if a gift, it certainly wasn't an easy gift. After The Little Mermaid, that was an easy gift, yeah.
Did you ever hesitate that you were good enough?
All the time, all the time. I threw out more stuff than I ever sent away or ever finished. And that went all through my 20s, I think, that I was still learning to write the way I wanted to write. So, no, it wasn't an easy thing.
What did your mother mean to you?
Oh, my feelings about my mother are very complicated because she was sick. She had Parkinson's disease, only it wasn't diagnosed. There had been Parkinson's disease epidemic when she was young. And she needed a lot of help. And she was difficult. Her speech was difficult. People couldn't tell what she was saying. And yet she was a very gregarious person who wanted very much to be part of a social life. And of course, this wasn't possible for her because of her speech problems. So I was embarrassed by her. I loved her. And I, in a way, perhaps didn't want to be identified with her because I didn't want to stand out and say the things that she wanted me to say to people. And so it became a difficulty that any adolescent has, many adolescents do, with a parent who is maimed in some way. And you want at that time to be totally free of such things. Yes.
Did she inspire you in any way?
I think she probably did, but in ways I didn't notice or understand. I can't remember when I wasn't writing stories. I mean, I didn't write them down, but I told them, not to her or to anybody, but to myself. But the fact that she read, of course my father read too, and that my mother, I think, would have been more agreeable to somebody wanting to be a writer. She would have felt that was an admirable thing to be. And the people around me, well, most of them didn't know I wanted to be a writer because I made sure they didn't find out. But it would have been to most people ridiculous because most people that I knew didn't read, and they took to life in a very practical way. And my whole idea of life had to be rather sheltered from people I knew.
Has it been hard to tell a true story from a woman's perspective?
No, not at all, because that's the way I think, being a woman and all. And that sort of, it never bothered me. I didn't realize, I think, this was a kind of special thing about growing up where I did. If anybody read, it was the women. If anybody had the education, it was often the woman who had been a school teacher, something like that, the way my mother was. And so the world of reading and writing, far from being closed to women, was much more open to women than it was to men. Men being farmers or, the people who did a different kind of work, an outdoor kind of work.
And you were brought up in a working class home?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where your story starts as well?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't realize it was a working class home. I just looked at where I was and wrote about it. Yeah.
And did you like the fact always to write on specific times, looking at the schedule, taking care of the kids, cooking dinner?
Oh, no, I wrote whenever I could. And my first husband was very helpful to me. He didn't actually do it, any writing or anything, but what he did was think of writing as an admirable thing to do. He didn't think of it as something that a woman can't do, as many of the men I later met did. He took it as something that he wanted me to do, and never wavered from that. It was great fun in the first place because we moved in here determined to open a bookstore, and everybody thought we were crazy and would starve to death, but we didn't. And we worked very hard. Hello, hello.
How important was the bookstore from the beginning for the two of you when it all started?
Well, it was our livelihood.
It was all we
It was
had.
everything. Yeah. We didn't have any other source of income.
No.
And the first day we opened, we made $175.
Which we thought was pretty marvelous.
Well, we were, because it took us a long time to get back to that again.
I used to sit behind the desk and, and look for books for people and do all the things you do in a bookstore. And generally just by myself or with my husband. And people came in and talked about books a lot. And it was very much a place where people got together rather than immediately bought things. And especially this was true at night, when I'd be sitting here by myself, and I'd have these people that came in every night to talk to me about something, and it was great. It was a lot of fun, and I had been, up until this point, I'd been a housewife. I was at home all the time. Well, I was a writing housewife, but it was just this sudden, wonderful chance to get into the world, and I don't know, I don't think we made much money in those times. Possibly I talked to people a bit too much instead of, getting them to the books. But it was a wonderful time in my life.
I live in Holland, and your books remind me of home. Thank you. Yes, I live just outside of Amsterdam.
Think of that.
Yeah, and I'm here, and
Here you are.
Yes, here I am, and here you are, more importantly. Yes, so your books remind me of home while I'm there.
Oh,
Yes.
good. I'm
Thank you
so
very
glad.
much.
Fine.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was nice. I mean, I love it when someone comes like that, and it's not just a matter of getting autographs, but it's a matter of telling you why, and, the whole thing.
But today, do you want young women to read your books and feel inspired to write?
I don't care what they feel as long as they enjoy reading the book. I want people to just to find not so much inspiration in any way as great enjoyment. That's what I want. I want people to enjoy my books and to think of them as related to their own lives in ways. But that isn't the major thing. It isn't something that I want people to do. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that I guess I am not a political person.
Are you a culture person?
Probably. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think I am. Yes. Yes.
But you seem to have a very simple view on things.
Do I? Yes.
And that you want, I read somewhere that you want things to be explained in an easy way.
Yes, I do. But I never think I want to put this more easily. That's just the way I write. I write naturally, I guess, in an easy way, without thinking that this has to be made more easy.
Have you ever run into periods where you haven't been able to write?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. Well, I gave up writing just about, how long ago was it? Not a year ago yet. But that was a decision. That was not wanting to write and not having it. It was more a decision that I wanted to behave like the rest of the world. In the sense that when you're a writer, you're never quite like other people. You're doing something, it's a job that other people don't know you're doing, and you can't talk about it really. And you just are always finding your way in this secret world, and then you're doing something else in the normal world. And I guess I was a little tired of that, though I'd done it all my life, absolutely all my life. When I got in company with more, what should I say, not more practiced writers, but who took it in a way that was more academic, then I became a little flustered, because I knew I didn't write that way and didn't have that gift. So
I guess it's a different way of approaching a story, how you want to tell it and how you want to work on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I never worked on it in that very, I was about to say conscious, but of course I was conscious. But I worked it in a way that comforted and pleased myself, more than in a way that followed some kind of idea. I think I could say that.
Did you ever see yourself winning the Nobel Prize?
Oh, no. I was a woman. But there are women who have won it, I know. No, I didn't. Just because I love the honor, I just love the fact, but I didn't, no, I didn't think of that, because I think most writers probably underestimate their work, and especially after it's done, and they don't go around to their friends saying, guess what, I think I probably will win the Nobel Prize. That is not a common way of greeting one.
Do you ever go back these days and read one of your old books?
No. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid I wouldn't like it. I'm afraid something would. No, what I would do, I would probably like it enough, but then I would get a terrific urge to change just a little bit here, a little bit there. And I've even done that in certain copies of my book that I would take out of the cupboard. And then I realized, well, it doesn't matter if I change it. It's not changed out there.
Is there anything you want to say to the people in Stockholm who...
Oh, I want to say that I am so grateful for this great honor, that nothing in the world could make me so happy as this. Thank you.